So this is about inclusive practice. Welcome up, Cliff Lewis. All yours.
Thank you so much. I just want to start off by thanking those in the who joined me on this journey in the inclusion group. There's a lot of vulnerability and experiences that were shared, and I'm really grateful that you felt comfortable doing that. And I hope I do you justice in what I'm about to say. So we started the process by talking about who is not included, whose voices are not heard, and we had a whole range of different groups, from women to First Nations people, to migrants, to people who don't speak English as a first language, mental health. We also heard about how the voices of people within the system who are actually trying to work really hard and do the right thing may sometimes also be silenced in that process. And it's important to acknowledge that they are an important, vital part of the system. From there, we went on to really looking at what is inclusion, what are the limitations, small and big, and what are the small and big things we can do and systems that need to be changed to be able to make things a bit more inclusive. Inclusion is complex, so there's no answer. I think what I'd like to leave us all with is what Dee said yesterday, is this notion about seek to understand over being understood. But what does that really mean, and what does it come down to, is this notion of accountability at all levels. We are all accountable, we are all part of the system, and we all can play a role as consumers, as carers, as clinicians, as in whatever way we can. And also looking at how can we actually translate policy into practice. There was a sense that, we've got great policy, amazing documents, amazing resources, but it doesn't really get translated into practice. It doesn't really bridge that gap between moving from being policy into being implemented. Talking about that notion again of inclusion is everyone's business, this notion about how can we integrate services so people who need help are not just sent between services as you go there, it's not my problem anymore, you go there, it's not my problem anymore. How do we integrate it all so we can actually provide that holistic care that considers the person's unique situation when we provide it? That came down to also in terms of being held accountable is this notion of training. Very often people they may have good intentions but might not engage because they are unsure, uncomfortable, don't know what to do, paralyzed by fear. So there is an element of training that needs to be happening across the sector to empower people with it. We also need to consider how we support diverse staff within the system. And one of the notions that came up was this idea about vicarious trauma that people might feel within the system, and how do we really acknowledge and support that, and acknowledge and support the diversity people bring to it that might exacerbate this vicarious trauma. In terms of how do we respond, we heard stories about how lack of inclusion can actually cause fear of engaging with the system and shut people out. So we do need to keep that in mind and start changing things within our own spheres as much as we can. So in that regard, this notion of scripts and how do we, pre-planned scripts, because sometimes when we're confronted with challenges, we might not know how to respond and we might be a bit paralyzed. So how can we respond with a pre-planned script? In what situation? What do we say? And the aim of the script is not really to demonize or challenge or put down the person who's said something derogatory or said something that's not inclusive, but to actually empower them through education, because inclusion has to go both ways, and this acknowledgement that the person who might be doing something that's not inclusive might not have the social situations surrounding them to know better. So how can we use those moments as moments of education instead of just attacking them? And another thing that came out which really resonates is this notion of acknowledgement of our limitations. We are all creatures of our own social circumstances, all creatures of our own environment. And that's not just us as people, but also organizations and institutions that are part of our society. So I think there is this call for a more honest reflection on what are our limitations, what can we do, what can we not do, and how do we then bridge the gap between what we can't do today to be able to provide better service and better support in the future. We do need to be honest with ourselves and acknowledge our own biases in how we approach this, biases as a person, biases as an institution. So hopefully I've left you with enough in terms of try and reflect on what we can do and where the gaps currently are within our own practice, and try and build those scripts to challenge and change processes as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you.